Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I have a review for a documentary this time around. It came out in 2020. I see it all the time on Shudder. I've scrolled past it over and over again. I wanted to save this documentary until about this time because I'm currently watching through the Evil Dead series. Now I'm on the TV show Ash vs. Evil Dead. I just uploaded Season 1's review yesterday because the new film, Evil Dead Rise, is coming out. And I kept seeing this documentary constantly listed on a recommendation list on Shudder for me. It was called Hail to the Deadites. And it's 2020, as I said. It's when the release was. It's about an hour and 19 minutes long, according to IMDb. And I'll tell you this, I thought it would be a documentary about the actual franchise, and I guess it arguably is. But it's more about the fans than the actual movies or anything like that. I'm sure there are documentaries, some kind of behind-the-scenes documentary or something on a DVD release or a Blu-ray release for the Evil Dead movies, or a box set or something, that will have some kind of documentary there. But this was not that. This was one about the fans. Kind of like, if you're a Star Trek fan, you've probably seen the films about the conventions called like Trekkies 1, Trekkies 2, something like that. I saw those years ago, and I remember those being great love letters to the fandom of Star Trek. And I was kind of hoping this would be the same thing, but for Evil Dead fans. I'm not a big Evil Dead guy, as I said in my reviews for the movies as I've been talking about them. I love the first film, I love the remake. I'm a fan of Army of Darkness, even though I'm not a hardcore diehard over it. I think it's good. I can't stand Evil Dead 2, and that's usually the one that people love and worship, basically. So I'm a little bit iffy. I'm a little bit iffy on the Ash vs. Evil Dead show so far. I feel like kind of an outcast when it comes to this franchise's fans, so I wouldn't really consider this movie made for me. You know, there are friends of mine, like another friend that I keep talking about in all of my reviews for Evil Dead because he's such a hardcore fan of those movies, franchise horror reviews here on YouTube. He's a great guy, really recommend him, good friend of mine. He essentially talked about being so hardcore of a fan. I'd be curious to see what he would think of this documentary. Because, again, it's more about the fandom and these different people we focus on that are hardcore fans. For example, we have people like this, there's a couple of people, as a matter of fact, who are big, like, cosplayers for Ash. Ash Williams, Bruce Campbell. And there are interviews they do in this movie for, as a matter of fact, they had Bruce Campbell for probably like 10, 15 minutes they were able to record. I think closer to 10 minutes they might have actually sat down and had interviews with the guy. But the things that he always says makes me love him more and more. He seems like he genuinely loves the fans, just like Sam Raimi does. By the way, Sam Raimi's not in here. Ted Raimi. Shit, I cannot talk today. Ted Raimi, Ivan Raimi, none of those guys are in here. Just Bruce Campbell is interviewed for this movie. But there are other people, too, that were in the previous Evil Dead films, cast members who haven't done anything since those movies, that are interviewed here as well. That was kind of nice. Not major interviews, but just kind of like snippets at conventions and that kind of thing where people behind the camera are meeting them, fans that they followed for this documentary are meeting those people for the first time. Those kinds of things were really nice. Excuse me, my eye is still watery from my allergies. Just in case this happens to be the first video you ever see from me, it's springtime and I feel like death. But aside from the Bruce Campbell stuff, aside from the cast semi-interviews with them meeting fans and stuff, was the fan focus stuff any good? I'll be honest with you, there's some really weird-ass stories on here. One of my favorites was how we focus on this one particular couple who got engaged in front of props and using props for their engagement. And at the end of the movie, it was like, and this is kind of a spoiler if you give a shit about this documentary, but at the end of it, it was like, in such and such date, they got their first divorce, now they found new love. And I'm like, why the fuck did you even focus on them then? You already knew what was gonna happen. You know, that kind of stuff made it this ironic, weird, funny shit that felt like an Evil Dead joke, you know? But the film is very straightforward about that being a documentary. I could not find myself loving this the way I did the Trekkies movies. Trekkies 1 and 2 had me very curious about what Star Trek was after I'd only been exposed to like the J.J. Abrams films all those years ago and the little bit of the William Shatner show on Netflix Once Upon a Time. Those movies had me even more curious about why did fans seem so diehard over Star Trek, you know? I don't think this movie grasps that well for Evil Dead. With all the collections you see, I mean, I have my Goosebumps collection. There are people who have Evil Dead collections that are bigger than this, and this is like 300 books, dude, if not more. There's massive collections. You would think that you would have more exposure to that, more interest in that for this movie. but not really. And you follow so many different fans. I think there's like 8 people they follow for this. But the storytelling of that, the story of them going to conventions and like some of them meeting Bruce Campbell, some of the stories for these people are tragic. Like one guy had lost his son. He had named his baby son after Ash. And I thought that was very sweet. It has heartfelt moments like that in these personal stories. But overall, the filmmaking, the filming of like the interviews and stuff, it's not that great. It's not that I was super engaged because of the content or anything. A lot of these stories, because there's so much focus on so many people, I feel like the stories aren't developed enough or really have a story big enough to really deserve an hour and 20-minute long film. It kind of gets a little bit all over the place, a little messy in that regard, because there's so much going on with all these different people's stories, as simple as they are to tell just they're going to go to a convention and meet whoever, you know? I wasn't in love with it. I think it's fine for a fan-made documentary, which was basically what it was, but other than that, you know, if you're not into that kind of thing, it's not going to be for you. If you're not an Evil Dead hardcore fan, it's really not for you either. So I guess that's kind of where I would lie on this. It's not that it's poorly made or anything, it's just not engaging, mainly because I'm not a big Evil Dead guy. You know, as much as I love horror, as much as I love that original movie and that remake, it's not for people like me. If you are a hardcore fan and you have seen this film, I'd love to hear what you have to say down in the comment section down below. It's very similar, my thoughts, now that I think about it, to a documentary about the fandom of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the Alvin Schwartz book series, trilogy, whatever, from way back in the 80s and 90s. There was a documentary that came out years ago called Scary Stories. I think it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe longer, I don't know. Could have been closer to 5. But that documentary had the same effect that I had here, of the weird shit we followed for people in this film that were fans of the franchise or whatever. And some of it's like, you guys are weird, you know? but a lot of it can be cool. It has cool moments. I enjoyed it in some aspect. I think it's fairly watchable. It's more watchable than the Scary Stories documentary. If that counts for anything, it's better than the Scary Stories documentary. But other than that, I wasn't a diehard over this. Even the clips they had for Evil Dead, being a fan documentary, they had to like reshoot, you know? They had to like reshoot with kind of, you know, cheap actors and actresses in really bad locations. They had some of it animated, you know, which was kind of nice. I mean, they changed up some things here and there. That was fine, I guess. It might have been the director's home videos from Once Upon a Time when he was a kid. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I wasn't in love with this. I'm a little surprised that Shudder has this. I also learned something new. My boy Franchise Horror Reviews kept referring to himself as a hardcore Deadite. And I thought it was a joke when I watched his video. And then I saw the title for this movie, Hail to the Deadites. Then I found out it was a fan-focused documentary. Apparently the fandom of Evil Dead called themselves Deadites. I didn't know that. Not criticizing them, just didn't know it. I thought I'd let you know that too. Anyway, when it comes to this 2020 documentary, I am not in love with it. As you can tell, it was fine. It's a little weird reviewing documentaries, but I still think you can cover the quality of documentaries for stuff. But I'm not about this. I'm not in love with it like a lot of people typically are. Not with this movie, but the franchise, and I think that kind of harms my view of this documentary a little bit. I feel like if I was a bigger fan, I would love this more, getting to see other fans. It's kind of like when you see the anime community get on YouTube, they watch every fucking thing they can about anime fans, and that's kind of what I feel like would be the case with this. That people that love it would love this documentary. But for people like me, no, I'm just kind of in the middle about it. If I had to rate Hail to the Deadites, the documentary, on a 5-star basis, I'd probably give it about a 3 out of 5 stars. It's very milquetoast for me. It's not anything I'm in love with, but it's not bad either. I don't want you to think that. It's just what I came away with was a little sloppy, but it was fine. It was fine. It was watchable, I guess, for the most part. A little cringy sometimes, but anything about fans are going to be like that. You know, it's going to happen. But anyway, what did you think about Hail to the Deadites if you saw this documentary? Did you love it? Did you hate it? I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments down in the comment section down below. Anyway, thank you all for watching. God bless you once again, and goodbye.